Welcome to part 2 of sculpting a monster bust in ZBrush and Blender. So here's the final result. So in this video we'll take a look at what it would take to polypaint this character in ZBrush. We're not going to do UVs or topology, we're just going to do a high-res polypainting. And then I will take a moment to also decimate the model so I can bring it into Blender and just see how it's looking. Alright, so with that said, let's continue. Alright, so let's jump right in and pick up where we left off. So this is where we left off on in part 1. So in part 2, let's just continue, right? The next logical thing for us to tackle is going to be creating this really cool effect where you have this almost like a light bulb with a brain inside, right? You have this translucent skin, and you have a brain inside that you can see, and you have this really cool paint on top. Let's go ahead and attempt to essentially create the illusion that this the top of the head is hollow, right? That's empty inside. So how would we do that? What would be the best way to do something like that? I think the best way to do this, right now I am in Dynamesh, and if I press Alt and select my the top of the head, you can see I have about 1 million points, right? Well, one thing I would like to do is I definitely want to split these spheres into a different layer, just so I can kind of focus just on that part of the head. And to get that going, what I'm going to do is let's go ahead and turn on our polyframe, do Control Shift to hide everything, and let's go ahead and go to split hidden. That's gonna put all of these spheres on its own layer, right? We want that, so let's come back here, and now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna press Shift and click on the eye to hide everything else. All right, so now since that's on its separate layer, I'm gonna jump out of Dynamesh. I don't really want to re-Dynamesh this, and the next thing I need to do is let's just separate this into two shapes, right? The reason that we want to separate this is because then in Blender we can apply a different material to different parts of the mesh, right? We don't want to be a solid mesh because then we can't apply two different materials. We want to split this, just like we're seeing in the reference, and then apply kind of a translucent glass material to the bottom, and then the top being solid, right? So how do we split this? Let me jump out of my polyframe and let me turn my double on just so I can see a little bit better what's happening here. Let's just mask this. So I'm going to do make sure that in my quick picks I have my masked pen selected, my active symmetry is turned on, and what I can do is I can literally just mask out the portion of the head that I want to kind of separate, right? So maybe what I could do is let's at first make it kind of even, and then we can create these little waves afterwards, right? So essentially at first let's just go around and select part of the brain or part of the head, I guess, that we want to separate. So something like this I think is perfect. I can't really see the top, but I'm assuming it's going to be something like this. Now what we could do to create these little waves that we're seeing right here, what we can do is make this brush a little bit smaller, press Control and Alt, and we can just literally just go through and create something a little more interesting. Maybe clean these up a little if you want. And it doesn't need to be exactly as the reference, but essentially just create something that looks like kind of these wavy patterns, right? So it doesn't look perfectly straight. So I'm going to go all the way around, do that, and that should give us what we want. I kind of even like this right there. I think that's cool. So now what we need to do, make sure you don't have anything sharp. If you want to add to your selection, obviously just press Control, and that will give you an add. And then if you want to subtract, hold on Control and Alt, and that's going to subtract, right? So you can take the time and clean this up and make it nice. And I kind of like mine. I think that's that looks good. Okay. Now to split this, what I need to do is I am going to, let's turn this on, polyframe. Let's do Control W, and that's going to essentially give us a different poly group, right? And that should look relatively clean. If this doesn't look clean, do this, go to your light box, go to your brushes, and then go to smooth, double click on smooth, find something called smooth groups, double click on that and say okay. And now what you can do is you can hold on the Shift key and just very quickly go around and make sure that all of this is perfectly clean, right? So go ahead and do that. Make sure that these are nice and clean. You can see the difference, right? If I zoom in, look at this here versus this, right? So very quickly I can smooth this out. And again, make sure your active symmetry is on. And let's go around and make this perfect, because we are going to be separating it. I see some situation right there. I'm not really sure how that happened, but I'm not really worried about that. We could fix that in a second if you have something similar, but essentially just go around, make this nice and smooth, and that should be perfect, right? All right, very nice. So now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna press Control Shift and click on the green. And I'm not sure if you have the same effect, but when I click on mine, I am seeing a lot of strangeness. For some reason, my mesh also got other pieces that are floating all over the place, right? You can see, even though I just masked this out, I'm having all these other issues. But that's really easy to fix. What you want to do is you just want to do auto groups. And by doing auto groups, it's going to separate our bottom one by itself, which means what I can do is I can bring everything back and do Control Shift on it again. And now you can see that I don't have all those other floating pieces because I just did auto groups, right? So ZBrush will automatically select this by itself if that's something you're experiencing as well, right? So now since this is by itself, what I could do is let's go ahead and do split hidden, right? I'm gonna click split hidden. If I come up here, you can see that now I have two layers created. One is this and the other one is the bottom piece, right? So let's turn both of them on so we can see, jump out of here, and now you should see something very similar to what we're seeing in our reference, where the bottom part is essentially separate, right? It's separate from all the other pieces, or the top piece, which means we can make this transparent, right? Very nice. So that was pretty easy. Let's turn this on and make sure all of this is still working, right? You don't have any gaps or spaces or anything strange. And that was pretty easy to do, right? Very nice. Okay, so now let's create the brain. We're gonna need the brain inside of there. And how do we get that going? Now to insert the brain, what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna go to Insert, and let's just do a sphere. I think that's fine. And I'm gonna put it into position right in the middle, scale it down, and let's turn on our transparency so we can see. And this is gonna be our brain, right? So I think that's cool. And I'm gonna attempt to match somewhat what I'm seeing here, which is gonna be, I'm gonna grab my move. You know what? I'm gonna grab my move infinite brush, make it a little bit larger. I'm gonna turn this into a Dynamesh, and I think, let's do 256, should be big enough. Do Dynamesh, control and drag to re-Dynamesh. I can even polish it, but what I'm gonna do next is I'm just gonna start sculpting this or moving it around into this shape, right? I'm looking at this pink brain inside, and I think something like this is all I want. And I want it to be nice and blobby and wobbly, right? You don't want it to be perfect and clean, right? This is gonna be our brain. You can make this smaller and just make even more waves and blobs and whatever, right? So you have something like this. I think that's cool. All right. Of course, it's not looking right from the side. So let me go ahead and turn the active symmetry on. And still using my infinite, move infinite, I'm just gonna kind of make sure that it looks okay from all the angles, including the top, the side, the bottom, right? All of this is great. And if I wanted to, I also need to push all of this in here, right? That's not really working. Make sure that you're not getting too close to the edges, right? And just kind of spin your model and make sure that it doesn't look like it's going through anywhere, right? To smooth this out, we can hold on the Shift key and just smooth this out. We still have our smooth groups on. I'm not sure we need that. Let's go ahead and change that. I'm gonna click on this, and I'm gonna find my smooth brush, right? So let me press S and find smooth. Where's smooth? There it is. I'm just going to select that again, say OK, hold on the Shift key and just clean this up and go around. If I wanted to see the brain a little better, of course, I can go into a solo mode and just make sure that all of this, looks good and makes sense, right? Let's do Control and drag to redynamesh, and now this is going to be essentially my base mesh for my brain, right? Okay, so how do we create the effect of the brain? It's kind of hard to see here, but we all know what the brain looks like. It's almost like a walnut, right? You want to create some lines inside here, even though it's an alien, right? We want to have that effect. So obviously we probably should use Damien Standard. Active symmetry is on. And essentially just start drawing. Let's do something like this, right? I'll set it to 40 in the sub mode, and I'm just going to start creating kind of a random nonsense for something that looks like maybe brain, right? And again, doesn't need to be perfect, but we do want that effect of something along these lines. To avoid the symmetry, I'm going to press X and let me turn that off and just very quickly create a bunch of lines, right? So I don't know what your brain looks like, but this is mine and I think it's perfectly fine. I'm going to do Control and drag to redynamesh this. I'm going to smooth this. And another thing that I could do just for fun, if we wanted to, we can polish it, right? Let's go to geometry. Let's do, let's see, clay polish. And let's just bump this up to like 50 by 57. And I'll put this on 50 and do a clay polish. And that's going to give us a really interesting effect. If that's a little bit too much, I don't know if you like this or not. It's up to you if you want to keep it super smooth like this. Or maybe this is a little bit over the top. So maybe I'll do something like this. So it's a little more stylized and you can see some really cool edges, but it's not so blobby and bubbly, right? I like this a little bit better. So to bring everything back, what I'm gonna do is let's jump out of the solo mode and take a look. Let's jump out of the transparency mode and hold on the Shift key, bring everything back. And now if I wanted to actually see the brain inside, right, I can of course actually turn on the transparency mode and see what that looks like, right? So now you can see we have the brain inside. Turn this off. We know that these pieces are now separate, right? That's going to be great. And we are good to go as far as the structure and the meshes go. The next logical step is going to be adding some paint, right? We're not going to be doing UVs, we're not doing topology. We have a really high-res model and we are just going to polypaint it and render it. So that's all I'm going to do. So to get that started, let's think about how can we sample some of these colors to use as our base colors, right? So again, I'm going to save my tool and let's talk about painting. So I'm going to start from the brain. I don't see why not. Let me solo this for 1 second. And essentially I want this brain to be this kind of a pinkyish color that's going to be the same also color for, looks like maybe his tongue, maybe the inside of the mouth, right? It's up to you. So let's select the pink color that we want, and now we can manually attempt to select the color that we want that we're seeing here. But is there a way we can sample these colors, right? Right now I'm using Pure Ref, and this is obviously zBrush. How can we sample our colors from Pure Ref? Well, we can't. But in our first video, if you remember, we did import our image in here as a texture, which means if we press Shift Z, we can bring it back. We can press Z again to get our UI here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on opacity and dial this all the way up. So I want it to be nice and bright at 100%. I'm going to scale this down. I don't really need it to be so large. I'm going to park it over here. And now what I can do, all right, obviously I don't need two of them, so let me minimize my Pure Ref. And now because this is inside zBrush, I should be able to sample these colors. So kind of a cool little hack. So I'm gonna hover over this color and press C, and that doesn't work, but if I press Z again and then hover over this, then it will work, right? Which is really interesting, but check this out. If I hover over here and press C, I can find the color that I like, right? I think something along these lines is good. And now to paint this color in, I am going to go to my standard brush, activate my RGB, turn off add and sub because I'm not modeling anymore. I just want to paint. So using my standard brush, I'm going to take my RGB, make sure intensity is at 100%, and I'm going to say fill object with this button right here. If I click on it, you can see on the right, this little thing shows up, and it's telling me that, hey, this mesh is now holding Polypaint information. Now you are going to see some highlights if you're using the same material as me, right? And that's not going to be useful to us because we we can't bring this to Blender, right? This material that I'm using right here is only in ZBrush. So I actually need to change my material. Let me change it to something more basic like skin shader. And now if I do fill object, you can see that that's going to look a little bit different. All right, so I think skin shade is going to be just a little bit better. Question, I'm going to press Z to get rid of this UI for a second. But what if I wanted to quickly also create some highlights for my brain? Could I use masking, right? Let's use masking to very quickly find kind of a peaks and valleys and automatically paint this in a much more interesting way than just a flat color, right? So to do that, what I'm going to do is go to, let's go to masking. What I could do is go to mask by cavity, and let me go ahead and turn this blur to 100% intensity, 100%. I'm just going to click mask by cavity. Okay, that's going to select all the inside part, which is great. Let's do control and click to reverse this, do control and click to blur this. And now what I want to do is I want to paint the inside of this to be somewhat darker than this original color. So I'm going to take this and just drag it down, make it a little bit darker. And let's do another fill object. Do control and drag and take a look. Now we have something along these lines where the inside here is a little bit darker, right? So that's pretty cool. Next, let's do peaks and valleys. So I'm gonna go to that. I'm gonna set mine to like 80, coverage about 65, and do mask by peaks and valleys. And that's going to give me kind of a really interesting custom selection here, and I kind of like this for what I need to do. So let's do this. Let's take our original color, and you can hover over any color and press C if you want to sample it, and let's just make it maybe a little bit lighter, or maybe actually a little bit darker. Just do some other color and do a let's do control and then let's do a fill object, right? And now you can see that that's going to give you kind of an interesting patchy effect with kind of a really interesting custom things that you wouldn't maybe normally paint, right? Let's say you like this, that's great. If you don't, another thing you can do is just select yet another color, something like this. Let's do RGB at like 10%. And let's just pump this color through the darks and the lights all at the same time, blending all of these together, right? So I'm going to start blending it by just clicking on this many times, and you can see how my brain is kind of blended together, right? And just these two colors kind of look a little more unified. Another thing we can do is maybe let's do a spray, and let's just change, maybe make it a little bit darker. And we can literally change the RGB intensity and just create, I'll do like 40, just create more noise on top, right? And you can see what it's doing. It's creating kind of a lighter and darker effects. And I think for like a cartoon brain, for Polypaint, something like this should be perfect, because then once this hits Blender rendering, I think that's going to look really nice. So you have all these different effects and all these different options to paint. If you did all of this work and then you want to bring these dark pieces or areas back, remember we can still go to cavity and press that as we did before, right? Do control and drag, blur this just like we did before, make this a little bit darker, fill object. And then of course if I wanted to, let's turn something on like toy plastic, right? You can see now it's kind of a wet brain And that looks pretty cool, right? As far as what we need, I think this is pretty much perfect. So that's gonna be pretty much it for my brain. I'm gonna move on to the next thing. Let's keep going. Let's open this up and let's decide what's next. For the bottom piece here, I think it should just be kind of white, right? Let's just do kind of a white, and in Blender we'll just make it transparent. So I'm going to select this white and I'm going to go to 100% RGB, and I am going to fill object. Right now you can see another paint appeared, and now we know both of these are done. Let's jump out of the solo mode so we can see. And of course we can't see our brain, right? I have to hide that to show you what the brain looks like because it's inside. But remember, this is going to be translucent, right? So we will see our brain in Blender. We're not going to see it here. Okay, very cool. How do we make these circles to be this nice red? I'm going to do Alt, select those, and now if I wanted this red color, remember we can press Z, hover over the red, and press C, right? And let's say I like this. I'm gonna do, all right, so let's color these, make sure they're not masked, and now that looks really nice. And let's see, so now we can see that this is indeed holding Polypaint as well at 100%, and it's gonna be a red color, right? Very cool. Next, let's talk about the actual skin. If I wanted to sample some of this green, again, I can do Z, hover over this green, press C to sample it. I'm not really sure if it's exactly getting what I want. I guess it's more like this maybe. Let me do Z to hide it. And I think it's close enough, so I'm gonna go ahead and do fill object. And to get all of these black designs, obviously all you have to do is just take the standard brush, switch it to to dots, right? Grab the black color, and you literally just have to manually go through and paint this, right? There's no fast way to do this. You have to manually paint the actual skin. So you have to take the time and do that. Right now you can see mine is kind of blurry, right? What if I want it to be a little bit sharper? You can of course change the focal shift of your brush, or you can even change the alpha, right? If I choose the alpha to be, like 14, that's going to be maybe a little bit closer to what I'm seeing there, right? So again, if I want it to be even sharper, I can change the focal shift. Let me just even do 0, and you can see how clear that is, right? So take the time and go through the model and do your patterns of whatever you like, or if you want to use the reference image. I'm not going to do that with the video. That's going to take way too long, but you get the idea. That's how you actually do it. So I'll do this on my own. I just want to kind of show you the basics of painting, and just so you know what you're doing, and you have Polypaint throughout every single one of these pieces, right? Because when you export this out into Blender, you want to make sure that every piece is holding Polypaint, obviously, right? In order for us to render this, right? So everything else is pretty much self-explanatory. It's the same process for all of these pieces. If you wanted to do the teeth, I can do Alt and select the teeth. And obviously, if I do solo, you can see right now this is part of the mesh. But remember, if we turn our polyframe on, we could do Control Shift and click, and I'll click it again to just reveal the teeth by itself, right? And that means if I wanted to color these, I can come here, press Z, hover over this nice yellowish color, and press C, and you can see, that's going to be something along these lines, I think, as far as the teeth go, right? And now I can do fill object. If I wanted to do the tips of these, same thing. You just take the standard brush, make this a little bit darker it looks like the top is a little bit darker, and you just go through and just add that dark color. But of course you want to change the alpha, right? And change your shift point back to normal. And now you can see how I'm doing that. I can even change my intensity of the color and just do something like this, where it's nice and gradual, right? To kind of match the reference. All right, and then to bring it back, I'm going to do Control Shift and click to bring this back. And let's say I want to color this now. So same thing, I'm going to press Z, hover over this color, press C. All right, and now I'm going to do Control Shift and click to hide my teeth and do a fill object, right? And if I wanted to, I can of course tweak this a little bit as well. And again, I can go through, do highlights, do all that painting stuff. I'm just showing you guys the process, right? So that's pretty much it. So go through and finish painting. And then once you finish painting, let's just, as a final step, add some fiber mesh to this, like these little hairs in the back. I'm gonna go ahead and skip to that next part. All right, so here I am an hour later. This took me about an hour to paint. So just using all the same techniques I was showing you guys, just adding some paint and sampling it right from the reference image, right? All right, if I wanted to do a quick BPR in here, I could do that. And this is what I'm seeing for the brain. Right now, this whole panel right here is just colored white. And of course, if I turn that off, you can see what the brain looks like. I just added a little bit highlights. I manually went over the edges of the parts that I could see and just literally just highlighted it using the lazy mouse. And I think it kind of gave me a little more control than using masking. So this is a combination of using masking and just hand painting it with lazy mouse, right? Just kind of highlighting the edges. So essentially, let me turn this back on. So this is what I got for fiber mesh. If you wanted to add fiber mesh, because I do see there's little hairs here, it's really easy in ZBrush. If you wanted to do that, let's do this. Let's hold on the Shift key and turn off all the paint, and I'll just make it white for a second. And if you wanted to add fiber mesh and you're not really sure how to do that, let me turn these off. So what you want to do is you want to select the body or the portion of the mesh that has fiber mesh. For me, it's just, you know, as we're seeing in the reference, it's just really the back. I don't really see it anywhere else. So just the back. So what I've done is, if you solo this, you could see I masked this part out. Okay. And then what I've done is I went to fiber mesh, and in here, I used the Lightbox fibers. So if you click on that, I just used this semi-random one, fiber 62. If I double click on that and press comma on my keyboard, that will close my Lightbox. But you can see what it gave me. It gave me this really long hair, which you know, is not really useful. But now what you could do is you can go through the fiber mesh settings and kind of adjust these, right? So coming, let's do it from the top bottom, right? So if you go to first one, here's going to be a length, right? Obviously, this is way too long. Ours are super short. So for length, you can just dial that down, you know, as much as you want. Right now, they're kind of, you could see they're kind of falling over, and that's because the gravity is turned on. So one of the things I could do is just adjust the gravity and maybe just kind of position them. You know, you can control the gravity and kind of angle them the way you like it. Maybe, you know, just decide if that's long enough or not. You can make them a little bit longer. Pretty easy, right? For coverage, if you use coverage, that's going to give you the control over the thickness of these, right? So, you know, you can decide if you're building something, if that's what you like. Maybe it's a good idea to make them just a little bit thicker so they're easier to see. And then you do have colors, right? So right now the base color is kind of a black, and if you go to tip, it's set to gray. But ironically, you can't really see it well because this is activated, which is the texture, right? So if I turn the texture off, you can see now a little bit better of how the fibers look. And now if I go back to let's go back to the coverage and adjust these, right? You can see how you can actually control the thickness of these, which is really cool. Now there's also something called segments, and that's going to be, if you press Control and hover over this, this defines the number of segments along each fiber, how many segments it has inside each fiber. So if you want to bend some of these, right? If you have long hair, obviously you want more segments. For me, for us, most of these are not really bent that much, so something like that is fine. So that's pretty much it. And once you are happy with it, you can just say, you can also control the scale of the root, which is going to be, make it a little bit thicker on the bottom, if that's something you want to do. You can also, of course, play with these other ones. But anyway, so if you say accept, that's going to create a new layer, right? And this is what it looks like. And if I wanted to jump out of the solo mode, this is the new one, right? Obviously, they right now look super generic and kind of default and ugly, right? You can go to brushes and choose something like, let's just choose this Groom Brush 01, turn our active symmetry on, and we can just bend these, make our brush kind of large. And, you know, we can bend these a little bit and create something a little more unique, right? So you could do that. It's up to you. And of course, there's many different grooming brushes you can play with. And then if you render even this right here, you should see something along these lines, right? Anyway, so if you play with the settings, you can control again the length, the thickness, all of that. Also keep in mind, you can just literally grab the move brush and move them that way as well. So a lot of control here. You can literally just sculpt them and clump them and move them around just using the basic move brush. You can even make the brush smaller and get rid of some of the pieces if you want it to be, you know, a little less dense. You can also hold on the shift key and just literally smooth these out, and you can see how they're just kind of melting in. So a lot of control. Fiber mesh is a lot of fun to play with. And now I have something like this. Let me hold on the shift key, turn all my paint back on, and now if I render this, you should see that, you know, I have something like this. Obviously, because I'm showing it to you guys, I made it super thick, but this doesn't make any sense. So my other ones, let me delete this one. I don't even like this one. But this other one that I made, I think is a little bit better, right? I just made them much thinner. That's the only difference. All right, so that is pretty much it for fiber mesh. So that's pretty easy. Now, the only other thing that I need to do, you know, now it's funny now, since I'm looking at this one more final time, I'm just realizing that all of this right here is actually yellow, not green. So that is a problem, and I need to touch that up. So let me do this. I'm going to press Alt, select the head. That's pretty good. And now I need to sample this color. So I'm going to hover over this and press C. And you can see I was able to sample that. I'm going to go to standard, and what I want to do is just have the RGB brush on with active symmetry turned on. That's great. And essentially this whole front part right here is kind of yellowish, right? So let's do this. I'm going to solo this, and what I want to do is I just literally just want to color this to match my reference. So all of this I kind of missed by accident, but that's okay. I'm going to leave that here so you guys can see my process. It's super basic, super simple. It's just essentially time consuming, and just you just have to make a lot of decision. If I wanted to make this a little bit darker, obviously I could just make this a little bit darker and come back here and just add, you know, I can even change the intensity and just maybe make this a little bit more darker, right? Another thing that's super useful that I was doing a lot is you can jump between the alphas, right? So if you want something more noisy, even this alpha 08, you can see you can create some noise by just adding, you know, something like this. So it's more patchy versus just smooth, right? Which works well actually with this character because of the way Adam used the paint. This does look somewhat patchy and textury, so it's very, it kind of works well, right? I think that's good. Let's jump out of the solo mode and take a look. And even right here, I think is already much closer to what I am seeing in the reference. Let me just press C one more time. Maybe just color this here too. Turn off my lazy mouse, and let me just add that here. Okay. I'm liking this. Now, what would be the next step? So the next step is obviously take this and bring it into Blender, right? Now, I am at 4.5 million points, and as I say a lot in my videos, I don't actually have a fast computer. I'm using an iMac, and my iMac is not even M1. It's an older iMac. So I can't do 4.5 million as is going into Blender. I do need to decimate it or optimize this. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to save this. I like all of this, it's great. Now, what I'm going to need to do is very quickly go through each piece and just decimate it. and make sure that I can reduce it down to maybe even below 2 million would be better, right? And I can fast forward to this part, but I'll show you a couple pieces just so you're aware of what the process is. And the only other thing I do want to mention that's really important, if you want to export fiber mesh into another application for rendering, you do want to select it. You want to select that layer that was created, and you do need to go to geometry, and in here you must press something called convert BPR to geo. So I've already done that, but that's something you want to do. So this fiber mesh will be converted to mesh or geometry, and then you will be able to export that out, right? So that's important. My fiber mesh is only 23,000, so I'm not even going to decimate that. It's low enough. But let's just go through these real quick, right? So I'll just go from the bottom, and let's just see. So this guy right here is 159,000 points. If I solo that, you can see that I'm talking about this guy here. And I don't need it to be that large. I think that's a little bit too excessive. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to Z plugins, go to Decimation Master, and again, before you do this, it's super important. Just make sure you save your work. And you can, if you do decide to decimate this, you can even save as and just do _ decimation, just so you have another version, right? So you don't mess up your original high res or high poly version, right? So I'm going to say pre-process current. And that's gonna do that. And now I'm gonna leave it at 20% and just say decimate. And as you do that, just always make sure you watch your, geometry, and make sure it doesn't lose quality, right? So I do want to say use and keep Polypaint, right? Obviously this is painted. So I'm not really sure. Actually, I forgot to press that. Let me do this one more time. Pre-process. And now I'm just going to say decimate. So I'm going to go from 159,000 to, it's going to jump down to 31,000. And visually nothing has changed, but the number of active points has changed. So that's great, right? So now I just have to do the same exact thing for all the other elements. Just literally just do pre-process and then do decimate. And that's pretty much it. So I'm gonna go ahead and do that to all of these pieces, and fast forward, and then let's pick up from there. All right, excellent. So that didn't take very long at all, and now you can see I went from 4.5 million to 930,000 points. All the Polypaint looks exactly the same. The quality of the character looks exactly the same. So that was really easy to do, and I think that was useful, right? All right, so once that finishes, the next thing we want to do is we need to merge all of this together, right? So we can export it out and have an easier time in Blender to kind of activate the Polypaint. We don't need all of these pieces to be separate, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hide the panel, and that is going to reveal the brain, because the only item that I need to be separate from everything else is the back panel, right? And I'm calling it a back panel, but you know what I mean, it's the back of the head. And the reason I'm doing that once again is because I want to apply a different material in Blender to make it transparent or see-through, right? All this other stuff could be all together, right? So what I'm gonna do is let's just do we could do merge down or say merge visible, right? I don't really mind merging down, so let me just merge it down. I'm gonna say skip for now. Let me just go through these really quick and literally just merge them all into one layer, right? And now we have 2 layers, so that's going to be all of that and just the panel, right? Now let me turn this back on, and the next step is obviously exporting this out. So you can export this out as FBX or OBJ. Both formats will keep the Polypaint, so it doesn't really matter. All right, so let's do export, and let's go ahead and jump into Blender. Here I'm in Blender, I'm using 4.2. It doesn't really matter what version you're using. All of this should be the same. Let's delete the default cube, go to File, Import, and let's just bring both of our objects into our scene. All right, so this is what it looks like. By default, he looks, I think, pretty incredible, honestly. I love how, I love this display that Blender does if you turn on the cavity, right? And you, if you are not seeing this, it's a really cool effect that you can only achieve in the solid mode, right? If I switch to any other modes, you lose this cavity. But if you want to turn this effect on, and you can see all the beautiful detail, right? You can go to this little shading drop down right here, and right there's something called cavity. If I turn that off, this is what it looks like. If I turn it back on, you can see my type is set to both, and I don't think I messed with any of this, but it has this really awesome preview that I love, right? Really, really cool. All right, how do we activate our Polypaint so we can see it in Blender, right? So to do this, obviously, we need to jump into a different mode. Let's go into the material preview mode. So I'm going to activate that. I'm going to select my monster, and let's go jump into data. And for anyone who's super new, if you open up color attributes, you can see the name of your Polypaint right here. So by default, ZBrush called it color, right? So that means to turn this on, all we need to do is just go to our shading and click on the monster. You can see I don't have any materials in here coming from ZBrush, so I'm going to say new, and now I have these nodes right here, right? Holding down the shift and middle mouse button, I can move these around. Using the scroller I can scroll this, you know, zoom in and out, right? But essentially I need a base color for this guy, and I need to create a new node. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to press Shift A, go to search, and just type in the word attribute. Okay, once you do, you should see this panel appear. So I'm going to drop it right in there, and I'm going to take my color and connect it to the base color, right? You can see that Blender doesn't know the name of the Polypaint, so we have to tell it, right? So we're going to say color. And boom, automatically all of the Polypaint kicks in. Let's do the same thing with our panel right here. Let's give it a its own material. Do Shift A, search, attribute, connect our color, give it a name. And now we can, of course, apply the glass material as we wish. The other thing that you could do if you wanted to play around with any of the colors, you can do, let's do Shift A again. And in here, keep in mind, you have all of these awesome nodes to play with. So you can plug in brightness, contrast, hue, all of this incredible fun options, right? So for example, I don't know, for whatever reason, let's say I want to pump up the saturation for this monster. Well, I can drop this in, put it right here, and then let's go ahead and take this and plug it into, this is going to go into a color, right? So we want to maintain that. But now we have this saturation dial, and if I start moving this around, you can see that I can go to black and white, or I can give it a lot more saturation, and that is super cool. I can also change the hue if I wanted to. Maybe I want to have a few different monsters running around. So all of these options are really fun. I just wanted to show you that. Let me undo that. I don't really need it. I just wanted to show you that fun node, that's an option for anyone who is maybe new to Blender. And let's go ahead and go to layout mode. And here we are, right? All right, and now at this point, it's just about dialing the materials, adding lights, and doing all the basic lighting stuff, right? So if you select your mesh, you can go to material, you can turn on subsurface. So one of the things I could do is maybe I want to change the roughness to make them a little more shiny, right? You could do that. That's beautiful. And let's select this guy right here, do the same thing. I'm going to change now if I change the alpha on this bottom one, right, you can see that now you can see the brain through, just like we had in the reference. And if you wanted to see how to set up lights and how to actually render, I do have many different videos on this. If you wanted to see a step-by-step process of lighting the character and setting up lights step by step, I do have a few other tutorials that you could follow, and let me show you what they are. So we did take the witch to be exactly the same way. We just used the Polypaint and then step by step rendered it in Blender. You can check that out. I also have a 10-minute tutorial called Render ZBrush with Blender, and this is Slimer from Ghostbusters. So in 10 minutes I show you step by step how to set up all the lights. So if you're interested, check out this video as well. So I hope you had a lot of fun creating Adam's character, and thank you so much for joining me. I will see you guys in our next video.